All right, guys, we are back. We just finished up our interview with Velvet Sky, so thank you again to her. That was awesome.
It was pretty cool.
I know she's such a huge cat lover, and I mean, like, that's kind of a big bonding thing now. It wasn't before, it was just because I used to treat with TNA Wrestling, I used to work on all of them, so that's how I originally had met her, and then she started using the cream, and was able to kind of help her out with some of her recent stuff. So, but now the cat thing, because I don't see her as often, we get to talk about it.
It was very interesting, and I had no idea that she had such a passion for animals, so that was pretty cool to see.
Yeah, yeah. And for what she plays like on TV and stuff, just seeing that different side of her, I hope that people enjoy that, seeing
Yeah,
that
her
on
fans, I
our-
bet they get some insight on different part of her besides what you see on TV, so that was cool.
So we wanted to move into our optimal concept of the week, and this week we're going to talk about personal accountability. I touched a chord with a few people this week on social media, on
Sure
my own
did.
social media. We were talking about, healthcare, whether it be a right or a privilege, and we'll get into that a little bit. But we wanted to talk today more about personal accountability in the grand scheme of things and how there's a difference between a creator mindset versus a victim mindset. And we want to talk about some of the consequences of that.
Sure, and we're going to bring this and relate it more to health, but overall, everyone likes to play that fiddle of poor me or victim me, and I want you to definitely break down victim versus creator mindset. But, when it comes to health, we are all given the same amount of hours in the day, and it's what we do with those to bring us closer to health or further away from health. With how we start our day and how we end our day and everything in between. So maybe you can begin with victim versus creator mindset, and we'll go from there.
So, in essence, a creator mindset basically says that I'm in charge of what happens to me on a daily basis. So I create my destiny, I create my reality. And that goes towards health versus a victim mindset where you take all the things that you're not in control of and you let them kind of dictate what you are, and you essentially become a victim of circumstance. So if you say, well, I have bad genetics and that's why I can't lose weight, or I have, I didn't grow up in the best area, so I can't possibly get a job. And I'm not saying that there's not a little bit to that, but there's a big difference in the mindset between one that says, I'm going to go out and I'm going to do whatever it takes to make it today, to improve my health today, to get better at this skill today, or get a job, or whatever it is, versus that mindset that's like, well, I just don't know. This happened and now I feel bad. And it's kind of that Eeyore mindset.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
I know that just kind of, it doesn't resonate very well with me. And I that's not to pick on anybody who does that, but I do think that from a standpoint of health, which we'll talk about in a second, it's one that you don't really want to carry around with you. And I do see it more and more, sadly, and I don't want to blame somebody else, obviously, but I don't know if it's a consequence of social media or mainstream media or what it is, but essentially these days, everybody's looking for somebody to blame. Nobody really wants to take that accountability. And for me, I can look at almost anything I do on a daily basis, and even if something bad, I can say, well, what did I do to get me here? Not who did this to me to put me in this position. Because I can always go back and say, look, hey, if I didn't do X, Y, Z, I wouldn't be here. So I got to own that. I have to take responsibility for that and choose to learn from that mistake. And that's the other thing. I think if you take that victim mindset, you never learn from any mistakes. You end up in a situation.
You don't grow from the inside. Yeah.
Right. So that's really the mindset. And then if you want to talk a little bit about the health consequences.
So I feel like you and I are probably two of the most busy people that I know. And I know my schedule at some point, if I don't start the day earlier, once I begin seeing patients, there isn't much time for myself. So it goes back to we all have the same amount of time in the day, but it's what you choose to do with it. I could choose to sleep in, or I could choose to keep putting myself on the back burner, but I wake up every day that much earlier to set the brain up for the day, and then I put my body through its physical demands as a workout, and then I'm ready to start the day with whoever walks through the door, and I get a chance to help them. because it's so easy to push that off and say, I'll do it later, I'll start next week or what have you. And this goes back to like when we were talking about 4th of July. It's easy to have a few bad days of eating and those habits can roll into, well, I'll just start next Monday. Well, if you took action the next day or started the slate clean, however you want to look at it, you can create a new trend. And these choices are not just, or I should say, the product of what you and I have built through the last 15 plus years of training, mindset, being a chiropractor, being a doctor, being a dad. You have the ability to start over tomorrow or continue a trend in the right direction the next day and the next day and the next day. So when it comes to health, you and I think let's start with nutrition, for example. We knew what we knew 15 or so years back, and how much has that changed over time? And we think a lot of it has stayed similar, but it's we know what's right for us, we know what's wrong for us, but it's kind of how do we make those decisions so that we can wake up feeling pain-free, less inflamed, healthy. So I guess when it comes to health, we like to make sure that we take care of so many people and teach them things that they can be doing on the daily. We have to continue those things or our bodies won't continue to serve ourselves. So like, I can't wait for our adjustment later today because I know that'll get me through the next week. And then when we do this again, we'll continue to do that. It just, your body feels good and it resonates good vibes when you are in a good place when it comes to health. So where do you want to go from here? Because I feel like...
Well, I know that we had looked at some of the negative consequences of that victim mentality. So
Sure.
In regards to those are being some of the positive things about the creator mentality, in the victim mentality, it does come with it a lot of stress. And one of those stress hormones is cortisol. Well, cortisol, if you have an elevation of that, it's going to suppress your immunity. It's going to cause you to gain weight. It's going to make it harder to lose weight. It's going to increase your overall pain levels. So your pain sensitivity is going to be up with that as well. So there's a lot of negative aspects to that victim mentality as well. And then what we had kind of touched on right at the beginning of this segment is right now, I mean, everything's about politics. We just had the Democratic debates and stuff like that. So we don't like to get really political here, but one of the problems in the political world, everybody's debating about healthcare. And we live it because, I want to be able to treat everybody. So on one hand, I'd love to see everybody have coverage where I could work and still make a living and still pay my own bills and provide the care for anybody and everybody who could walk through my door and not wonder, well, can you afford it? Or can you pay this bill? Or do you have a $90 copay, which is stupid. And sometimes you're even seeing stuff like that. Insurance is almost unaffordable for somebody who's self-employed. There's a lot of problems right now with the system. But if we put something in a position where healthcare becomes a right and the government, a single payer, comes in and pays for everything, how do we have that personal accountability for your health? And I use the example on my social media. I said, if I go skydiving and break my leg, that's different than if I'm walking around and I trip over a curb and break my leg. One was a direct consequence of a decision I chose to make and a risk I chose to take. And another one was a legitimate accident. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, creator mindset, I still probably could have been paying better attention to the curb. But the other one, I was taking a deliberate risk.
A high risk.
Mm-hmm. So if I'm a smoker, is it the taxpayer's responsibility to pay for my heart problems and my lung problems? And if I'm substantially overweight and not working towards a better situation for myself, is it their responsibility to pay for my insulin and my diabetes treatment? I mean, this is the stuff that I think the policymakers have to kind of struggle with. So when people are kind of clamoring for this single payer and government sponsored healthcare system, we have to be honest with ourselves. In the United States, there's a lot of rights that would probably end up going away if we had that, because they're going to sit there and they're going to monitor it. And we have, if you're involved in healthcare, you understand what are called diagnosis codes. And we deal with this system that it can get really, really specific. It can be like fall off of a set of bleachers. And so that's one code. Whereas
getting run over a stampede of bulls or something like
right,
that.
They're so ridiculously specific. But what I think that's working towards is identifying the risk patterns. Because if, again, you're out on that safari and the bull ran you over or whatever, or you were running with the bulls in Pamplona, that was a risk you chose to take. So probably your health insurance is going to be like, no, not buying that.
What I like to see them. So there's a couple stats here too. So two things that I feel like we all have control over is, what we put in our mouth and then how much activity we put through the day. Okay. So, 70% of all costs in the United States healthcare system, 70%, is from chronic diseases. And what they're finding is poor diet and a sedentary lifestyle are the two biggest factors in that. So let's all take into consideration office jobs. We either sit or we stand all day long. Cars, we're sitting again, commuting to and from work. What do we do when we get home? Sit around, watch TV, and then eventually we go to bed and we're laying. So there's a lot of time that we're spending not moving around. How easy it for us to do, like we talked in previous episodes, 10-minute walk after what we put in our mouth. It can help lower blood sugar. Since the 1970s, obesity has gone from 15% of the population in the United States to 34%. I'm sure that number is continuing to rise. Obesity lends itself well to changes because it is greatly influenced by what? Diet and exercise. Two aspects of life that can affect all Americans equally, and they both have the best potential for significant improvement. So what would be cool to see is if these insurance companies or policies can somehow monitor what we are doing, and if we're putting ourselves at a higher risk, like you just mentioned, are we creating or are we falling victim? And again, taking action and owning that personal accountability is what we're talking about here. So it's all interesting.
I think that I had come up with a stat that said $1 billion per day right now is spent on cardiovascular care, and at a high level of that being chalked up to what's considered a preventable disease. And that's scary, and that's something that, again, if we are going to take on a situation where we do end up with some level of a single payer, folks, we're going to have to expect that we're going to be monitored and we're going to be looked at. So you may as well start this now. And let's be honest, you've got one body. I don't really give a crap about insurance or anything else. You should be taking the accountability because you've got family, you've got friends, you've got people that depend upon you, and you got one shot. So we really should be working more towards an overall healthy situation. Like you said, you either go more towards disease or you go more towards health. We should be taking those things. And one of my friends brought up a really good point. It's very expensive to eat healthy, unfortunately.
But it's even more expensive to be sick if you were going to get there.
Yes, it absolutely is. But it shouldn't be cheaper to roll up and get a $5 pizza from Little Caesars. No offense, Little Caesars, but you shouldn't be able to get a $5 pizza and feed the family versus getting like a good cut of meat and some good vegetables is going to cost you 2 or 3 times as much if you don't want it full of pesticides and other stuff. So there is a problem there. I strongly believe that nutrition should be being taught in our elementary schools. I also believe it should be taught to parents. If a new parent, you should be taught how to feed your kids. And I just don't mean like formulas. You should be learning how to take care of your kids through those early years. And let's make a better decision between the high sugar cereal so that the 4-year-old's sitting there, eating the cow's milk and, Lucky Charms versus, give the kids some eggs.
Can I add one more?
Absolutely.
You were talking about, what are the two that you just listed? Teaching, cooking, and nutrition. Teaching it to the medical doctors.
Absolutely.
Because how many times do people tell you or I, I've got a cardiologist that's telling me I need to lose weight, but he's 150 pounds,
overweight.
Yeah. But across the board, to doctors out there listening, get yourself in shape, get yourself taken care of, start to walk the walk and not just tell people what to do. Like, you guys need to own this too. We take care of ourselves. It's not easy, but it's fun. It's fun to be able to do the things that other people our age can't do. And we want to be that beacon of light for you guys. So thank you for tuning in. And hopefully this is something that excites you guys too. It gets us charged up because...
Yeah. Who wants to be a hypocrite? I don't want to give somebody lifting advice if I'm 120 pounds. I don't want to give somebody diet and exercise advice if I'm 50 pounds overweight myself. I just think that it comes off hypocritical and you're just not going to get that patient buy-in. So from the physician standpoint, absolutely. So this is a long debate, man. This is not something that we have the answers to, but I think that part of my whole deal with even bringing this up on the social media and pissing everybody off with it was to say that, look, there's an answer out there. And there's somewhere along the line, we're going to have to take responsibility for our health. We have to have this personal accountability. And then from a standpoint of a governmental situation, these are things that we all need to look at. So I hope that people get off this train of it's either one or the other, and there's something in between that has never been proposed. I'm open. I know you're open. Put me on a policy making group, because honestly, one of the things I said, and this is true, I hate to say it, but the smart people aren't in politics. The smart people are out there doing jobs like us. So we have to be willing and able to put ourselves out there and contribute to changing policy for the future. And we all need to stand up for what's right for our patients and our kids and our families, our seniors, whatever. I mean, yes, there is some times where when it comes to healthcare, I said, the 3-year-old who has leukemia is not the same as the 40-year-old smoker who's 150 pounds overweight who's in the hospital for a heart attack. They're two different things. And somewhere in the middle, that's where we're going to have to find those answers to how are we going to make sure that people have access to health care who really need it, and people aren't kind of abusing the system, really understanding what's valuing what's given to them. And I think that the personal accountability makes you kind of work for then what you're given, and then you just own it a little bit more.
Well said.
Cool.
Yeah, good topic.